Hello, everyone. You're welcome to another session of SQL. Okay, so we have learned about crude. We know crude, and okay, so said crude is more like the foundation of the queries. We need to understand like basic queries in SQL, right? So we have C R U D, where C has to do with grades. Okay, it's just a little recap. R has to do with read, U has to do with update, and D has to do with delete. And when we talk about create, we are dealing with the likes of inserts. Then when we say read, we are talking of select. Then update is update. So these are the names of the queries that satisfy that particular foundational knowledge we need. And delete is also the delete query. Okay, so we we've extensively discussed to create, and now we have idea of select, but let's see what we can do with select. Let's explore the entirety of the select query or the select statement in SQL. Okay, so first of all, what I will be doing here is I will start by I will start by loading or activating the SQL environment with this code SQL, and this has activated the environment. Then the next, I would have to connect to my Postgres database. Okay, so I would just look for my Postgres credentials. This is it. Okay, so let me just write the full. It's meant to be is SQL. Okay, so let me just copy that and paste it here. It should connect. Cool. All right. Now we want to see our table. So I'll start with my magic cell command and then select all from employee, employee, and get this. Okay, so this SQL was meant to be, there should be no space. Okay, so these are the records in my employee table. Okay, so now what is the next stage for this? We would want to see other kinds of the select statement. So we know about select asterisk, which means select all, right? So we could say, so let's do some notes and say we have the select all, okay, which is presented with an asterisk. All right, so it selects all the records, fetches all the records from the table. All right, so now we would want to select we want to select specific columns. Okay, we want to select specific columns. Okay, so how are we going to do that? To select specific columns, we would say, for example, if I want to select just the first name and the last name, and probably with the location, let's just do the first name and the last name. All right, so I could say s- my magic command first, and then I would say select first name, select first name. You have to be careful because Postgres is case sensitive. So select first name and say last name. Okay, then you put the emp let me add location. All right, so I have to put the column names. All right, I'll put the column names. Then I say the I use a comma to separate each of the column names. Okay, so when I write down the column names that I need the name that I need to extract to view, then I just continue my statement, which is from employee, and that's all you need to do. So when you run this, you would see that it will display only the columns that you have declared here. Okay, so all the columns you called out here are the only columns that will come out. So this is how you select specific columns in case you are not interested in the entirety of the columns of the table. There are some tables that could have so many columns. Okay, so when you have those tables having so many columns, the information you probably need may be based on just few of those columns. It could be two, it could be three, it could even be one. Okay, so when that happens, when that is the situation you are in, then you have to use these concepts instead of using the asterisk, which is to select all. Okay, understood? All right, so this is another form of selecting columns in the database or from your table. All right, so now let's talk about another concept or another aspect of select, and that is selecting with a condition. Okay, so let's next is so this is the first we we talked about, which we've been using. This is the second. Okay, so I said another aspect is to select select based on select based on a condition. Okay, so it's more or less like say filtering the table. Okay, so it's like a filter. All right, so it's more or less like filtering the table, and for that for this kind of select you would need you will need a keyword called where. Okay, so let's do that. Now let's go back to our table. We want to select we want to select we want to select records from this table that has just say Byron. Okay, so we want to select records from this table that has the first name as Byron. So I want to see all the persons on this table that have Byron as the first name. Okay, I could also say I want to see all the people from a certain location in this table. For example, France would show me two persons, right? So Ghana would show me two persons and the rest. So I want to select specific condition based on specific conditions. I want to see records that meet those criteria. So now I would use the where clause. So I would write this a magic cell. Then I would say select. Let's still use the select all. I would say select all from the table, which is employee table. Okay, now then I include my where clause. Okay, where would say the first name equals Byron. So when I do this, it will filter the table, the entire table, and give me only records that meet this criteria. Okay, so when I run this, I would see that the only records that will be displayed here are records with the name Byron as the first name, because that is what I asked for. So you could see that these Byrons represent different personalities because they have different IDs. Okay, so they could have similar information, but they have different IDs. Okay, now let's see something else. Now I want to insert. I want to insert another record. Let's see. So I want to insert another record. Um, I would say insert. into the employee table. Um, so I'll use like a shortcut kind of insert. So I'm not calling the columns. I'm just directly putting the values. Okay. So let's say the let's just put let's just say the employee ID is probably 10. Then I say the first name is, let me use Byron as the first name. Then the middle name is, let's say, Frank. Okay. So then the last name could be maybe the age could be, say, 32. The location could be, I could use different. Okay, let me go for Nigeria. All right. So now let me do something else again. So I want to add another. I'm making a multiple entry. So let me just put it on the second line. So I could make this 11, and I want to, just give it or like funny facing. Then yeah, just give it any name. So somebody. Then another. So yeah, maybe we do this for 31, and this could be, oh, this could be, let's say, Canada. All right. So when I run this, it goes in. It says two rows affected. So let's see our table. So select all from employee, and you will see this. So we have the records that we're looking for. So these are the records we inserted, and this is the other record. So we can see this, right? So the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to show us the different casings that we could use. Okay, so we have Byron with a capital letter B. We have the one that starts with a small letter. Then we have the one that has camel casings. Okay, so now let's go back to our select statement based on condition. All right. So I would rewrite that statement that I'm looking for records that has to do with Byron. Okay. So now for the first name, so I would say select all from employee table. Okay. And I'm going to say where the first name equals Byron. So we ran this before, right? So let's do this. So you could see that the new records I put in did not display. That is because Postgres, Postgres, Postgres SQL by default is case sensitive. Okay, so Postgres SQL by default is case sensitive. So now the column names of Postgres, the column names and string comparisons are case sensitive. That's what it means. Are case sensitive. All right. So what it means is that it will detect exactly the kind of spelling I want. So if I did with the small case here and I run it, it will pick only that particular record that has the exact spelling, including the cases that I declared in my where clause. Okay, because it is case sensitive. So I don't expect that if I do this, it will generate the entire Byron record, whether it is with a capital B or a small b. Nah, that's not what's going to happen. Okay, but if you are using your my SQL, if you are using my SQL by default, my SQL by default is case insensitive. Okay, my SQL, my SQL by default is case insensitive. Okay, so that means if you were operating based on my SQL environment or based on my, yes, if you are operating based on my SQL, you realize that um, just imputing this the small letter b would give you all the records that has this spelling. Okay, it doesn't matter the cases in my SQL, but in Postgres it is sensitive. However, However, if you want to, if you want Postgres to be, if you want your Postgres, if you want your query, your SQL query in Postgres to be case insensitive, there is a way to do that. Okay, there is a way to do that. Then you would have to use, you have to replace the equal to operator. Okay, you have to replace the equal to operator with an operator called I like. Okay, you would replace it with an operator called I like. So I'll call this the I like operator. Okay, so the I like operator converts it to an insensitive case. Okay, it converts your query to skip the sensitivities of the casing. Okay, so this is how it's being done. So if I do this and I say select all from employee where where first name, it's an underscore, where first name equals Byron. Okay, so I would use equal Byron, right? So instead, I would change this operator to I like. Okay, so when I run this, it shows me all the Byrons that meet the criteria of the first name without being case sensitive. Okay, so it doesn't matter if Byron starts with a capital B or a small b, or even if there's any of the alphabet in the name, if there's any of the alphabet in the name that starts with a different case, as long as it meets the spelling criteria that there is a Byron. Okay, it's it nails out the sensitivity of this. Okay, so you could have some business use cases that you might want the system, probably the way you recorded some things or the way some records were captured, you probably want to see all the names that has this spelling. Okay, and you don't want it to be case sensitive, then you have to replace the equal operator to the I like. All right, so that's how to change the sensitivity of that particular query for a particular record. Okay, so now that is properly understood, I hope. All right, so we can continue. So we've satisfied the condition of sensitivity with the cases. So if you use the default method of using equal to, it will give you the information based on case sensitivity. Okay, but if you replace the equal to symbol with the I like, then it will nail out the sensitivity for that particular query. Okay, so now there's one more thing we need to explore. Let's assume that we let's go back to the query we did initially where we selected specific columns. So we selected, let's just do two columns here: first name and we and last name, right? So we also added location. Okay, so let's do that. So we added location from employee table. Okay, so now If I run this, which we have done initially, it gives us this information, right? First name, last name, employee location. So now there is something. Let's assume that you don't want first name to be what is represented in the final output. Okay, you want it to represent something. Probably you want this record to be saved in a file, okay, and be handed over to somebody, and you don't want this kind of formatting to show, okay, because this is done like in the database, but you don't want this formatting to show. So there is a way to do it without going to convert the column names. Okay. So how is that going to be done? There is something called alias. All right. So you could do that using alias. All right. So alias is an English term. So it's more like in SQL is more like represent, use this to represent this particular name. Okay, so let's see that in action. So okay, let's use this table. All right, so for the first name I probably want it to just be name, so I use the keyword as. So this is the keyword you use for alias. So you use the keyword as, that's the at keyword. Okay, at keyword. All right, so now I would say first name, I want first name to be seen as name. I could even put, yeah. So I want the last name to be seen as surname. Okay. So, and I want the employee location to be seen as, I could say, origin. Okay. Which, now let's run this again. You can see that the name is name, the surname is surname, the origin is origin. Okay, so it has converted those information. It didn't change it from the database. Okay, it didn't change it from the database. It's just for this view that you want it to be, that it has made it represented in that way. Okay, so that's what alias does. That's what alias does. Okay, so we have satisfied the conditions for select. So throughout, so far in this session, we have talked about the select all statement. Okay, we've talked about, I think I had already written things on that. So we talked about the select all statement, that you use this to fetch all the records, use this to fetch every record from the table, right? And we've also talked about select specific columns, which an example is more like, say, um, column A, comma, column B, comma, you could put column M, okay, and so on. All right. So that is selecting specific columns based on your criteria. Okay, so now another form that we also checked is selecting based on a condition. Okay, so which we had to use the where clause. Okay, so we had to use the where clause to do that. All right, so then we said PostgreSQL by default is case sensitive, and the column names and string comparisons are case sensitive. That's what it means. All right, so but there is a way to actually make that case sensitive nailed off. Okay, but that is based on the query you are doing. So if you are running a query and you don't want it to be case sensitive, then you replace the equal operator to the highlight operator. Then we ended it with the alias keyword. Okay, so the alias is more or less representing, it's like representing the column names, representing the column names with a preferred, with a preferred, say, name. Okay, with a preferred name. Okay, so you could, for the view, for the view of the output view, let me just do that, the output, for the output view. All right, so it's more like representing those names with a preferred name. Okay, I think since we are talking of more than one name, so with preferred names. Okay, for the output. All right, so that would be um, a conclusion for the select statement. Okay, for the alias, if I remove the as, okay, if I remove the as, okay, and I just do it without the as, just put a space, it's still going to give me what I want. Okay, but to be on the safe side, it is better to put your AS. All right, so that is it for the SQL select statement. I hope you enjoyed this session.